You're too late. She doesn't remember you." But when she knelt and their daughter reached out with trembling curiosity, the room froze. And he felt the truth hit him harder than any accusation ever could. Stay with us. What begins as heartbreak often becomes power, because the woman they dismissed is about to reclaim the voice they tried to silence, and nothing in her world will stay the same after this moment. Where in the world are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments. Have you ever rewritten your own story? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Black Stories Untold with Love, and ring that notification bell for more heartwarming stories that celebrate strength. The lights in the school gym flickered softly, casting long shadows across rows of folding chairs and handmade paper stars, the kind of scene that should have felt simple and sweet. Children humming nervously backstage, either parents whispering reminders, a piano being tested at the far corner. But for Peter Davis, the night carried a weight he could not explain. His daughter clutched his hand with the easy trust only a child can give, her tiny fingers warm against his palm. She wore a gold ribbon in her curls, a bright little sun in a room of buzzing noise, and every time she looked up at him with those deep brown eyes, he felt something inside him tense, then soften, then tense again. Madison's eyes. No matter how much time passed, that truth never faded. Peter guided his daughter toward her class, helping her find her place among the other children. She smiled at him before joining the little line. He returned the smile, but it didn't quite reach his own eyes. 5 years of quiet nights and steady routines had taught him many things, but peace was not one of them. He had rebuilt his life brick by brick, but the foundation still hummed with a missing piece, a wound disguised as endurance. A story he never rewrote because he couldn't bear to read it again. He found a seat near the middle of the room, surrounded by parents who balanced excitement with exhaustion. A teacher tapped the microphone, the crowd hushed, and that was when he sensed it. Not a sound, not a movement, a shift in the air itself, like the room inhaled and forgot how to exhale. Peter looked toward the back of the gym, expecting nothing, prepared for everything. And there she was, Madison. For a moment his mind could not reconcile what his eyes already believed. She stood near the exit with her arms loosely folded, her posture steady in a way that seemed to challenge the ground to hold her. The soft overhead lights caught the gentle glow of her brown skin and the delicate line of her jaw. Her curls were longer now, framing her face like a crown grown from survival. She looked the same yet entirely different, like someone who had traveled through storms he could not imagine and returned with the proof written in her eyes. 5 years of silence lived between them. 5 years of questions that never found answers. 5 years of a daughter growing taller, louder, sillier, wiser. 5 years of Peter convincing himself that the absence no longer stung, but seeing Madison standing there, with her expression calm and unreadable, pulled every buried truth to the surface. He felt his chest tighten in a way that was both familiar and brand new. A wound reopening, a ghost becoming flesh. She did not look at him at first. Her attention stayed on the stage, on the group of children who would soon begin their recital. But there was something in the way she stood, like she was bracing for a moment she had rehearsed in her mind until the edges blurred. And when she finally turned her head, when her gaze drifted across the crowd and collided with his, the world around them dissolved into a single suspended second. Her eyes held no accusation, no apology. Only a heavy quiet, a truth both of them recognized. He had once loved her with a devotion that felt like gravity. She had once looked at him like he was a safe place to land. Now they stood on opposite ends of a room, pretending not to remember the wreckage. The children took their places on stage. The piano began to play. The crowd leaned forward, eager and warm. But Peter sat frozen, pulse racing, breath caught in the back of his throat, staring at the woman he never fully let go of and never truly understood. And Madison Nelson, the mother who once disappeared into her own darkness, had returned at last. The air in the gym felt thin, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Peter sat frozen in his chair while the children on stage began to sing, but his attention was locked on the woman standing near the exit. When Madison finally turned her head fully toward him, the world around them dimmed. His breath left his body in one stunned, aching rush. 5 years had passed, yet the recognition hit him with the force of a memory that never stopped bleeding. She looked stronger now, calmer. Her curls framed her face like a crown shaped by healing, and her posture carried a quiet resilience he had never seen before. But beneath that strength lived a stillness loaded with pain. Her arms remained folded across her chest, steady but rigid. Her eyes stayed mostly on the stage, watching the children sway and sing, but her body told the truth. She was bracing, preparing, holding herself together by threads. Peter could not look away. Every line of her face, every shadow under her eyes, every breath she took tore through the careful life he had built. He had promised himself he no longer needed her. He had told himself closure was unnecessary. But seeing Madison again carved open every place he had buried her. When the recital ended and the applause faded, the room shifted into a gentle chaos of cheerful parents and excited children. Madison stepped back, slipping into the hallway before the first wave of families rose to their feet. Peter hesitated, still seated, heart pounding against the weight of 5 years. Then he stood and followed her. The hallway was quiet, a stretch of dim light and echoing footsteps. Madison stood near the window, her shoulders tight, her back straight. The glow from the street lamp outside softened the angles of her face, but nothing softened the tension in the air between them. She turned toward him slowly, as if she knew he would come, but wished he had not. Their first words were stripped of warmth, not loud, not cruel, simply sharp and clipped, shaped by old wounds and trembling with everything they had never spoken aloud. Peter asked nothing gentle. Madison offered nothing soothing. Her voice was steady but cold, carrying the calm of someone who had practiced this moment until the feeling drained from it. She gave no explanations, no reasons for her vanishing, no recounting of the storm she had once drowned in. Peter felt anger rising, but beneath it lived something worse. Hurt, abandonment, fear he never admitted. She met that storm in his eyes without flinching. She had expected it. She was ready for it. Then she said it, the words that sliced through him with precision. She was here for her daughter. Nothing more, nothing less. Not for him, not for forgiveness, not to fix whatever shattered between them. She was here because the little girl they shared deserved to know the mother who had disappeared from her world. The truth hit him hard enough to stagger. He felt the echo of it in his bones. Madison's presence was not a beginning, not a reunion born of hope. It was a reckoning. And as she turned away, leaving him in that dim hallway with the ghosts of everything they once were, Peter realized something terrifying and undeniable. The past he had tried to bury was alive again, clawing its way to the surface, demanding to be faced. And whether he wanted it or not, Madison had returned to finish what they never had the courage to confront. The first note of the children's song drifted across the gym, soft and bright, but Peter barely heard it. His world had narrowed to a single point in the far corner of the room where Madison stood motionless, her presence turning the air electric. His breath left him in one sharp pull, as if his lungs had forgotten how to work. 5 years of silence collapsed in an instant. Madison looked different. The fragile woman he remembered was gone. In her place stood someone steadier, calmer, with curls framing her face like a crown earned through fire. Her eyes never left the stage, but her body told the truth. Her shoulders were stiff, her jaw tight, her fingers curled lightly at her sides as though bracing for impact. She seemed both rooted and ready to flee, a contradiction he felt deep in his bones. Peter could not look away. Memories slammed into him without mercy. Laughter in their old kitchen, the dim ache of arguments that spiraled too fast, the empty crib the morning she walked out. He had rebuilt himself from the ruins she left, or at least he convinced himself he had. But now, with her standing a few yards away, that fragile reconstruction trembled, threatening to fall apart. The recital ended to warm applause. Children ran off stage in a flurry of excitement, but Madison slipped into the hallway before the crowd surged. The hallway was dim. Pale light from a vending machine flickered against the walls. Madison stood near the exit, back straight, arms folded in a way that looked protective rather than closed. She turned her head slightly as he approached, just enough to let him know she felt him coming long before she saw him. Their first exchange was thin and brittle, words shaped by old wounds that had never fully healed. His voice cracked despite his effort to stay steady. She did not apologize, not for leaving, not for the silence, not for the years he had spent stitching himself together while raising their daughter alone. Peter felt anger flare inside him, but beneath it lived a deeper ache, a need for answers. A need for her to acknowledge the storm she left him in. But Madison gave him nothing. Instead, she delivered a single truth with steady eyes that did not look away. She was here for her daughter. That was all. The words sliced clean through him. He had braced for explanations, excuses, apologies, anything that might rebuild the parts of him that had collapsed when she left. But her simplicity struck harder than any confession. She was here because their daughter had grown tall enough for her absence to start building questions. She was here because the child they created deserved more than a story with missing chapters. Madison shifted her weight as if preparing to leave, but something in her eyes held. A flicker, a grief he almost missed. It told him that this reunion hurt her as much as it hurt him, that silence had not erased her story, only buried it deeper, that she carried her own scars, ones he had never known how to see. Peter swallowed hard, fighting the instinct to reach for her or accuse her or beg her to stay. The hallway felt too small for the emotions rising between them, too narrow for the years pressing against their ribs. One thing was certain. The past was alive again, raw and breathing, clawing its way back into the present. And neither of them could pretend it stayed buried any longer. The afternoon sun softened into a warm gold as children spilled out of the school doors, backpacks bouncing, laughter rising in bright waves. Peter stood at the edge of the pickup area, one hand tucked nervously into his jacket pocket, the other hovering near his daughter's shoulder. He tried to steady his breathing, tried to pretend that today was just another ordinary day, but nothing felt ordinary, not after last night, not after seeing Madison. His daughter swung her legs absent-mindedly as she waited, humming the tune from the recital. Peter watched the curve of her cheek, the curl of her lashes, the deep brown of her eyes. Madison's eyes. The truth of it pressed deeper today than it ever had, as if the universe were preparing him for the moment unfolding at the far end of the sidewalk. Madison stepped into view. She walked slowly, as if each step required courage drawn up from the deepest parts of her. The breeze caught her curls, lifting them gently around her face like a halo forged from memory and pain. Peter felt his body tense, instinct thrumming through him. Protect, guard, shield, but he forced himself to stay still. He had no right to decide this moment for either of them. His daughter noticed him stiffen and followed his gaze. She froze. A small sound escaped her throat, soft and confused. Her eyes widened, recognition shimmering uncertainly beneath the surface, as if her heart remembered someone her mind had never truly known. Madison stopped a few feet away, her breath shaking, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. Peter felt something break inside him. Madison lowered herself onto her knees, the soft crunch of gravel echoing like a prayer. She placed her hands gently on her thighs, palms open, offering no pressure, no assumptions, only presence. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Mami Madi. The name floated into the air, fragile and trembling, like something delicate reborn. Peter watched his daughter stare at her, not with fear, not with rejection, but with a searching, tentative wonder. The little girl took a hesitant step closer, then stopped. She looked at Peter for reassurance, her eyes full of questions he had no answers for. All he could do was nod once, slow and steady, surrendering to a truth too big for him to control. The child turned back to Madison. Madison's breath hitched. Her fingers curled slightly against her knees as if bracing for the possibility of rejection, for the weight of a consequence she had carried for years. But her daughter did not turn away. She moved closer, drawn by something instinctive and ancient, something deeper than time. She reached out a tiny hand. Madison covered her mouth, a sob caught in her throat. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she let her child's fingers wrap around her own. That small touch held the power to shatter and heal in the same breath. Peter felt the ground shift beneath him. In that moment, he no longer saw the woman who left. He saw the mother who broke, the mother who drowned in silence, the mother who had clawed her way back from the darkness for this single moment of truth. Their daughter stepped fully into Madison's arms, and Madison cradled her as if holding a piece of her own soul she had lost and finally found again. And Peter, standing a few feet away, felt a clarity he had never known. This was not abandonment. This was survival. And the story they were about to unravel would change everything. The sky had already darkened by the time Peter asked Madison to stay. Heavy clouds gathered above the parking lot, thick and restless, as if the weather itself understood the storm forming between them. The wind carried the chill of an oncoming downpour. Their daughter waited inside the car with a coloring book, unaware of the fault line stretching open between her parents. Peter stood a few feet away from Madison, hands trembling slightly despite being tucked into his pockets. He tried to sound calm, steady, composed, but the words came out thin. He wanted to talk, to understand, to piece together the fragments of a story he had spent years refusing to see. Madison looked at him with exhaustion rather than anger. Her shoulders sagged, her eyes shadowed. She had held herself together for her child, but now the weight pressed harder. She agreed to talk, but the moment their eyes met, the air cracked. Old wounds rose like tidal waves. Peter's voice carried the bitterness he thought he had buried. He spoke of nights alone with a crying newborn, of mornings waking to an empty space beside him, of the betrayal that became the story he lived by. Madison flinched with each word, her own guilt tightening around her breath. But she did not defend herself. Not right away. When she finally spoke, her voice shook. She told him about the darkness that swallowed her after giving birth, the heaviness that filled her body until movement felt impossible, the terrifying thoughts that slipped into her mind without warning. She had feared sleep, feared being awake, feared the silence, feared the crying, feared herself. She felt defective, unworthy, dangerous. She told him how she hid her pain because she believed it made her weak, how she waited for him to notice, to ask, to reach for her, how the silence between them grew into a chasm she could not cross. The world expected her to bloom into motherhood effortlessly, and instead she felt herself unraveling. Peter stared at her, stunned. He had never known. He had seen the exhaustion, the tears, the distance, but he misunderstood every sign. He mistook fear for detachment, shame for indifference, depression for rejection. He realized now that he had never truly looked at her, not with the clarity she needed, not with the tenderness she deserved. The first drops of rain began to fall, tapping softly against the asphalt. Their voices rose, not in cruelty, but in the desperate honesty of two people drowning in memories of what they once were. Madison accused him of building his world around ambition, while hers collapsed in silence. Peter admitted he had chased success because he thought providing meant loving. They both realized how many moments they had let pass unspoken, how many cries for help had been swallowed by pride or fear. The storm broke open above them, rain pouring down in heavy sheets. They did not move. The water soaked into their clothes, ran down their faces, blurred the sharp edges of their pain, but neither stepped back. Their past had become a battlefield carved from misunderstanding. A war fought without weapons, only wounds. Yet in the middle of the storm, something softened. Something shifted. Peter saw the mother who had broken quietly. Madison saw the man who had tried and failed without knowing how to do better. The rain washed over them like a reckoning, a cleansing, a painful truth laid bare at last. And for the first time, they stood in the wreckage not as enemies, but as two human beings who never learned how to ask for help, yet somehow survived long enough to try again. The days that followed moved with a quiet, trembling rhythm, as if the world understood that something delicate was taking shape. The mornings came softer, the afternoons lingered longer, and in the small pockets of time between drop-off and pickup, something inside Peter began to settle and shift. Madison returned to the school each day with a steadiness that surprised even her. She approached her daughter gently, never rushing, never assuming, always waiting for the child to choose the pace. Some days their daughter ran into her arms with small, excited hops. Other days, she approached slowly, studying Madison as if memorizing a face she somehow already knew. Every moment carved itself into Madison's heart like a new beginning written over an old scar. Peter watched from a cautious distance, hands tucked awkwardly into his pockets, pretending to check messages he never opened. He stood close enough to protect, far enough to give space. He saw the way Madison lowered herself to her daughter's eye level, the way she listened with full attention, the way her voice softened as if the world narrowed to that little girl alone. He saw a mother. Not a ghost from the past, not a mistake, not the woman who broke under weight he never understood. He saw the woman she had fought to become, grounded and intentional, her presence warm enough to melt the frost that had once covered every part of their history. And it changed something in him. Slowly, without permission, his heart began to remember the woman he once loved. Not the memory he painted from hurt, but the real woman, the one who laughed with her whole body, the one who used to dream out loud, the one who now stood under the afternoon sun with the resilience of someone who rebuilt herself one breath at a time. Madison noticed him too. But she saw a different man than the one she had walked away from. The impatience was gone, replaced by a quiet attentiveness. The sharp edges of ambition had softened into something gentler. Fatherhood had shaped him. Responsibility had deepened him. She saw a man who tied tiny shoelaces with steady hands, who carried a child's backpack over his shoulder as if it were sacred, who waited outside the classroom door with the kind of devotion no one had taught him, only life itself. Their conversations began shifting, less clipped, less defensive, more honest in their simplicity. They asked about each other's days. They shared small stories about their daughter. They began to speak without biting, without performing, without pretending that nothing still hurt. The walls between them did not fall all at once, but faint cracks appeared, thin as hairlines, gentle as hope. And through those cracks flowed conversations they had once been too young, too afraid, too lost to have. One afternoon, Peter walked beside Madison to the parking lot while their daughter skipped ahead. The sunset stretched gold across the pavement, and in the fading light, he saw her differently. Not just as the woman who had returned, but as the woman he never stopped aching for. The realization struck him quietly, without drama. He still loved her. He had always loved her. Madison felt it. She sensed it in the pauses between his words, in the way his eyes softened when they lingered too long, in the quiet exhale he released whenever she walked away. But she kept her heart guarded, wrapped in the tender caution of someone who had learned the cost of breaking. She was not here for him. Not yet. She was here for her daughter, for healing, for truth. And Peter understood that if he wanted a place in the life she was rebuilding, he would have to relearn her carefully, patiently, without expectation. He would have to earn what he once lost. The peace that had begun to form between them was still thin as glass when the first fracture appeared. It happened on a quiet Saturday morning in front of Peter's house. The kind of morning where the sky sat pale and still, pretending nothing heavy was waiting in the wings. Madison had come by to take their daughter to the park. Peter walked her to the driveway, sharing soft conversation, warm in its new ease. Then his mother stepped outside. She moved with the polished precision of someone who had spent her whole life curating herself. Her pearls glimmered faintly in the weak morning light. Her posture straightened the moment she saw Madison, as if bracing against something unpleasant. She greeted her granddaughter first, sweet and gentle, the perfect doting grandmother. But when her eyes lifted to Madison, that sweetness vanished. Her voice was neat and sharp as cut glass. She said Madison's return had stirred chaos, confusion for the child, stress for Peter, discomfort for the family. She said the timing was convenient and suspicious. She said the past should stay buried, and Madison should consider the damage she had already done before trying to insert herself again. Each word dropped like a stone. Madison froze for a single heartbeat. Peter saw her fingers tremble before she steadied them at her sides. She stood tall, her spine a quiet line of dignity, her eyes fixed on his mother with a calm that bordered on heartbreaking. She did not shrink. She did not defend herself with fire or fury. She simply refused to absorb the poison being handed to her. Peter felt heat rise through his chest, slow and dangerous. His daughter looked between the adults, sensing the shift in the air. Madison took one soft step back, protective instinct flaring. She whispered that she would come another day, that peace for the child mattered more than winning a fight she had no intention of starting. His mother nodded as if Madison had proven her wrongness, as if righteousness had just been restored. And that was the moment the reckoning arrived. Peter stepped forward, breath tight, heart pounding. Years of silence pressed against his ribs. All the moments he never spoke up. all the times he hid behind confusion and pride, all the ways his mother's polished control had shaped his narrative. He felt it break inside him. He told his mother clearly, calmly, fiercely that Madison was not chaos, that she had fought her way back to their daughter with strength he could barely comprehend, that she had shown more courage by returning than most people ever muster in a lifetime. He said she deserved respect, not judgment, compassion, not condemnation, understanding, not assumptions. He told her that the story they told themselves about Madison was incomplete and unfair and cruel. His mother stared as if he had spoken in another language. Madison stared as if she had never seen him before. He kept going. For the first time in years, he stood not beside the easy narrative, not behind the version of himself that avoided conflict, but firmly in the truth. He said he would not allow anyone to belittle the mother of his child. Not now, not ever again. The silence afterward hung heavy and bright. Madison's eyes softened, something warm and wounded and grateful flickering there. She saw a man she did not know before, a man who could have saved her back then if he had known how, a man he was finally becoming. In that moment, Peter understood the cost of change. It was not enough to heal privately, not enough to regret quietly. If he wanted a future that included Madison and the daughter they shared, he had to confront every person who benefited from her absence. He had to fight for the truth he once ignored. And for the first time, he was ready. Peter first noticed it in the drawings that began appearing on the refrigerator door. Crayon pictures with 3 figures instead of 2. A small girl holding hands with her father on one side, and a woman with curls like a soft halo on the other. Sometimes the figures were standing under a bright sun. Sometimes they were beneath a rainbow. Sometimes the woman's face was only half-formed, as if their daughter was still remembering her, still stitching together the pieces of someone her heart recognized even before her mind did. She started asking small questions, too. Innocent, curious. Do I get 2 bedtime stories now? Can Mommy Madi come to my dance show? Does she know I love chocolate ice cream? Each question opened something inside both parents. For Peter, it was hope. For Madison, it was a quiet ache she carried like a fragile gift in her hands. Madison felt that ache grow each time she picked up her daughter from school. The child ran into her arms with a joy that felt too big for Madison's still healing heart. She tucked curls behind tiny ears, kissed soft foreheads, and tried to ignore the trembling inside her chest, the longing to stay longer, to stay fully, pressed against her ribs until breathing felt like work. But so did the fear. She had once drowned in motherhood, lost herself in it. Broken under the weight of expectations she was too ashamed to question. She remembered the nights she sat in the dark, convinced she would damage her child more by staying than by leaving. Those memories still lurked in the corners of her mind, shadows she could not always outrun. One afternoon, Peter found her standing beside her car long after their daughter had waved goodbye. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. Her shoulders trembled with the effort of holding herself together. He approached slowly, carefully, as if nearing something sacred. She did not look up when she spoke. Her voice was thin and unsteady. She said she was terrified. She said she wanted more time with her daughter but feared the old darkness might return. She worried she might not be enough. She feared failing again. She feared becoming the woman who once ran. Peter felt those words strike him like cold water. He stepped closer, not touching her yet, letting the moment breathe between them. He told her the truth he should have told her years ago. She had not failed. She had suffered. She had been swallowed by an illness neither of them knew how to name. and she had clawed her way back. She had returned. She had chosen to face the memory of her own collapse in order to rebuild something tender and real for her child. He called her brave. The word shattered something inside her. Tears slipped down her cheeks, slow and quiet, as if her body was unsure it had permission to release them. Her breath hitched. Her shoulders curled inward. For a moment she looked like the woman he once held on sleepless nights, fragile and exhausted. But this time she did not run from the comfort offered to her. She leaned into him, just enough for her forehead to touch his chest, enough for him to lift a trembling hand to her back, enough for the world around them to fall still. He held her gently, arms steady, heart open, not claiming her, not fixing her, just holding her in the way she should have been held the first time she broke. And for the first time since her return, Madison allowed herself to be held, allowed herself to believe she might not break, allowed herself to imagine she could be enough. Their daughter's drawings fluttered in Peter's mind. 3 figures, a family forming from the ashes of what once was. Maybe this time they were ready to build something real. Love did not return to them in a blaze. It came quietly, like the slow brightening of morning light slipping through half-drawn curtains. Days folded gently into each other as Peter and Madison found a rhythm that felt fragile but real. They rebuilt not with grand apologies or sweeping promises, but with presence, with consistency, with every small moment that once slipped through their fingers. Evenings sometimes ended with the 3 of them sitting at the kitchen table, crayons scattered everywhere as their daughter narrated entire stories only she understood. Peter watched with a soft smile while Madison listened intently, as if every word their child spoke was a gift she had waited years to unwrap. He saw her learning motherhood again in tiny steps, kissing scraped knees, braiding hair with slow practice, laughing at knock-knock jokes that barely made sense. She was careful, intentional, afraid at first, but every day she leaned in a little more. Peter found himself falling for her again, but differently this time. Not with the urgency of youth or the desire to prove himself. He fell in quiet glances across the dinner table, in the way her voice soothed their daughter to sleep, in the grace she carried despite the heaviness she had survived. Madison was no longer the woman who had broken. She was the woman who had rebuilt herself, piece by trembling piece, and he felt humbled just witnessing it. Their conversations deepened, soft, late-night talks across the small divide of the couch while their daughter slept. They spoke about the years they lost, the things they misunderstood, the versions of themselves they outgrew. Peter admitted the truth that haunted him, that he had blamed her because it was easier than admitting he failed to see her pain. Madison let the silence absorb his confession before telling him softly that she had forgiven him long before she forgave herself. She began seeing him differently too, not as the ambitious young man who rushed past her needs, but as the father who learned tenderness the hard way, the man who kept promises, the man who showed up to every school event, every sick day, every moment their daughter needed him. She saw strength in his patience now, depth in his stillness. She saw the man he had become, not the one she left. Healing wove itself between them so gradually that neither realized when the distance stopped feeling necessary. One Friday evening, during a movie night on the living room floor, their daughter shifted sleepily between them. She curled into Madison's side, then reached for Peter's hand with her tiny fingers. Her voice was soft, drifting between waking and dreaming as she whispered that she wanted both her parents, here, together. The words cracked something open inside Madison, not with pain this time, but with release. The last wall she had built around her heart collapsed under the weight of her daughter's wish. simple and pure. Madison felt the shame she carried for years finally loosen its grip. She felt forgiveness wash over her like a warm tide. Not forgiveness from Peter, not from the world, but from herself. She looked at Peter, eyes glistening in the dim glow of the screen. He looked back with a softness that held no pressure, only truth, only love. Madison reached for his hand. And for the first time in years, she let herself hold it without fear. The hallway outside the school gym buzzed with chatter and bright colors, tiny hands holding paintings, parents pointing proudly at clay sculptures and crayon masterpieces. It was the kind of joyful chaos that used to make Madison shrink inside herself, afraid of eyes that might recognize her, judge her, question her. But today she walked through it holding her daughter's hand, her back straight, her steps steady, Peter beside them like a quiet pillar of support rather than a shield. The moment they entered, conversations paused. Curious stares drifted toward them. Some people remembered her face only from old photos taped inside emergency files. Others from whispered stories passed among parents. A few recognized the shape of her daughter's eyes reflected in her own. The looks came, soft and surprised, but Madison did not flinch. She squeezed her daughter's hand and kept walking. She felt taller than she ever had in her life. Her daughter tugged her forward excitedly, eager to show both her parents the painting she made. Madison watched her skip down the hallway, her curls bouncing, her laughter echoing off the walls. That sound alone would have been worth every moment of fear she had fought through, every memory she had stitched together after breaking, every night she spent convincing herself she deserved to come back. At the art display, their daughter pointed proudly at a canvas full of bright swirls and bold strokes. 3 figures stood side by side, a little girl in the middle, a man with gentle eyes, a woman with a crown of curls, all holding hands, all smiling. The breath left Madison slowly, like a tide going out. Her daughter stood between her and Peter, beaming up at them as if she had painted her own wish into existence. Madison brushed a hand through her child's curls, her palm trembling with tenderness rather than fear. A teacher approached them with an encouraging smile. She greeted Peter warmly, then turned to Madison. There was no hesitation in her voice, no pity, no question of legitimacy. She treated Madison like a mother, a present mother, a whole mother. Madison answered her with confidence, explaining how proud she was of the art, how creative her daughter had always been. Her voice carried strength she did not recognize at first, not because it was new, but because for the first time she could hear it clearly. Peter watched her with a look that made her chest warm, not possessive, not relieved, proud, amazed, grateful. He saw her fully, not as the woman who left, but as the woman who came back standing taller than any version of her he had ever known. He saw the way she steadied their daughter with a soft touch when she grew too excited. He saw how she engaged with teachers, how she listened, how she smiled with the quiet confidence of someone who had walked through her own darkness and emerged with her head high. Madison had not just returned. She had reclaimed herself. Later, as families began to drift out and the noise softened into gentle echoes, Madison looked around the gym where the walls were covered in children's dreams made visible in paint and clay, and for the first time she did not feel like an intruder in this world. She belonged here. Her daughter's small fingers wrapped around hers proved it. Peter's steady presence beside her confirmed it. She had not come back to rewrite what happened. She had come to reclaim her place, to step back into a life she once fled. Not out of shame, but out of courage. She had come to build a future shaped not by fear, but by truth, by healing, by forgiveness, by a love stronger and deeper because it had survived the fire instead of pretending it never existed. And as she walked out of the school between her daughter and the man she was learning to trust again, Madison felt something she had not felt in years: whole, present, home. If this story touched something in you, don't let it end here. Someone in your world is carrying the same silent weight she carried. Share this video and let them know they're not alone. Healing often begins with being seen. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, drop a comment, and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe to Black Stories Untold for more stories that uncover hidden struggles, celebrate strength, and remind us that every voice matters.